Hi, welcome to Books and Bourbon. I have another video for you today, and what I'm going to be drinking is Evan Williams Bottled in Bond. So I'm not sure how many of you have tried this. It came highly recommended. I have taken one drink of it, opened it up last night, but I'm going to pour out a glass and drink it and kind of tell you what I think. And the books, plural, that I want to talk to you about is the Bourbon Saga by Fonda Lee, which is a fantasy series. The first is called Jade City, and the second is called Jade War, and the third is called Jade Legacy. So these are pretty interesting books. I read all three of these last year, and I want to talk about genre a little bit. These are all genre books. This series is fantasy. And sort of what genre means for my reading journey and maybe some parallels to the whiskey. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So like I said, this is Evan Williams, Bottled in Bond. And I did a little bit of research about Evan Williams, and I don't know enough to talk really educatedly about it, but he was kind of an old figure in whiskey production back in the day. So quite an interesting history and story. And Heaven Hill is the distiller for all Evans Williams products. So that's interesting as well. Let's go ahead and pour out a glass. So a lot of you are going to understand what bottled in bond means. I know what it means. I didn't know what it meant when I first started to watch YouTube whiskey videos. Everyone would say Heaven Hill Bottled in Bond, Evan Williams Bottled in Bond. And so that was just a phrase that just kept surfacing. So it was one of those phrases that I had to quickly go to Google and try to figure out. And apparently in the late 1800s, so right about the turn of the century, the federal government actually started to regulate the production of whiskey in America and actually have really specific guidelines for being able to manufacture and distribute. And that became kind of federally bonded, if you will. And so the warehouse where they aged the whiskey had to be federally bonded. The whiskey that was then going to be labeled as bonded needed to be aged at least 4 years, and it had to be 100 proof. And so I think, it's an interesting moniker. There's a lot of history there when you see a bottle that says bottled in bond or bonded. And it's kind of cool. It's kind of a cool little history lesson. Certainly if you're getting into whiskey and bourbons and you're having people over and entertaining and you want to talk a little bit about whiskey and whiskey history, it's a nice little data point to bring up. I'm not super knowledgeable about it, as you can tell, but knowledgeable enough that I can sort of introduce this with some context. The 100 proof is great. I've found that I like a lot of the higher proof stuff. I like the 90s a lot. I don't think there's super anything wrong with anything in the 80s, although I'm not really drawn to that. But I feel like 100 proof is like a perfect balance of that alcohol content and richness of flavor that you're looking for with higher proof, but it's accessible. It tends to be, easy to drink. And so it's a really wonderful balance. So yeah, it's actually a really nice color on that. I just tried a little bit last night, and so I wasn't able to see what it looks like in an actual kind of more full glass with a couple ounces in there. But that's a really wonderful, rich color. And so, totally honestly, I didn't have a huge high opinion of Evan Williams. I saw a lot of people kind of in my 20s getting wasted on Evan Williams. I don't think any of it was Evan Williams Bottled in Bond, to be fair. But this is one of those brands, Evan Williams, that I think is actually pretty cool. I think I have tended to like the Heaven Hill stuff. I like Elijah Craig, and I want to try more of Heaven Hill's bourbons. and I kind of like that you can get this for under $20. And we're going to taste it, and I'm going to tell you what I think. Although my initial tasting last night was that this was good. It was tasty. Apparently this goes up against much more expensive whiskeys and comes out on top in a lot of blind tastings and things like that. So it sort of has a bit of a lofty reputation. And part of that is the fact that it's less than $20 at the store. I think I paid like $19.99, and I probably overpaid by a couple dollars. Although I did buy in Oregon, which meant no taxes or additional fees at all. So when they say $20, it's $20, which is pretty cool. So yeah, let's let this rest for a little bit. And I want to talk about these books. Fonda Lee, she's actually, I think she's locally here in the Portland, Oregon area. I live in the Portland, Oregon area, and she's a local author. I didn't know that when I started to read these. My cousin was really big on these. He's a big fantasy reader. And I think these were really good. Like, these were highly engaging. As you can tell, they're quite thick books. I think this is the shortest one, and it is itself quite a behemoth. So a ton of pages. I burned through it pretty quickly. And it's just one of those pieces of work that are super accessible. And at the same time, the writing is excellent. And I'm not gonna sort of sit here and say that it's like the pinnacle of literature. In my last video, I talked about Dostoevsky, and when you think about sort of the tiering system, if you will, of literature, it's not like this is up there with Dostoevsky. But what I really appreciated about these books is there was a deep commitment to character development. The characters are interesting. You want to spend time with them. The dynamics between the characters is interesting, and you just love to sort of be with them. And there's certainly interesting plot developments and stuff like that, but I felt like with all of these books in this series, it was really about the characters. The characters were just really well-rounded. Some were more well-rounded and rich than others, but I felt like if you spent any time with any one character in this whole series, and there was a lot of them, they all were dealt with seriously. You didn't have cookie cutter characters, caricatures. The dynamics between the characters was always really complex. And that went up and down in scale, right? Like some were super complex, and some were maybe not as complex, but still taken very seriously. And so I just really appreciated that about these books. And they were just a joy to read. And I think Fonda Lee, big props to her. She's a great writer. Is she writing, incredible philosophical fiction that is going to change your outlook on life? No, she's not doing that. Is she writing really well-crafted, exciting, accessible books that I would recommend to anyone? Yeah, she's doing that. And I think that's pretty cool. So I don't know if you caught sort of the connection about why I chose Evan Williams' Bottled in Bond for my drink tonight, and then also these fantasy books that are called the Greenbone Saga. But I just find it really interesting that there is this similarity where you can spend $20 on a bottle and have that be high quality, and some of the biggest whiskey experts and connoisseurs in the world are going to say, yeah, this is a great bottle of whiskey. Does it mean this is the same as, some of the most expensive bottles out there? Is it the same, complexity as a Pappy Van Winkle? No, it's not. And it doesn't need to be. It can be an enjoyable pour. It can be a really well-crafted bourbon without having to be the best in the world. It can just be a solid, well-crafted, well-developed drink that anyone can enjoy. Same thing with this genre fiction. I'm not a huge fantasy guy. If you looked at my bookshelf, you wouldn't see a lot of fantasy, actually. You'd see quite a bit of science fiction. I do like science fiction, and it tends to be a little bit more heady and philosophical, which I am naturally drawn to. But I really enjoyed these books, and it made fantasy accessible. And so whether you really want to become a well-rounded reader, or you want to be a well-rounded whiskey drinker, I think that don't just go for that high shelf stuff. You know, don't just reach for the most dense, hardest reads that you're just gonna kind of gut through. And don't choose the highest shelf liquor and whiskey. It's okay to read something that's meant to be enjoyed. It's okay to drink something that's meant to be enjoyed, and it doesn't have to be the best bourbon in the world. But I think that the one thing is, there's a lot of crappy books out there, and I think there's a lot of crappy whiskeys. But they don't have to, they're not necessarily crappy because of the price point or because of the genre, right? And so it's being able to discern what's a good book. For the Greenbone Saga, it was character development. I think the plot was complex. It was fast paced. It was well written. It was just like a really well crafted book series. And for Evan Williams, Bottled in Bond, from what I've heard, just a really solid drink. So that's a lot of setup. That's a lot of talking. I certainly recommend these books if you want to just be able to sit down and enjoy yourself. Sort of the equivalent of like watching a really good blockbuster movie or something like that. Yeah, sit down with these Greenbone Saga books. They're really just a joy to read. And as far as Evan Williams' Bottled in Bond, let's go ahead and take a sip. Well, I'm going to smell it first. So I noticed this last night as well, is like the nose on this isn't like jumping out at me. It just sort of feels like that kind of whiskey smell that I associate with whiskey. And a lot of that could do with the fact that I don't have like the most developed sense of smell or palate yet. I'm working on that. So I bet, you know, someone who's way more experienced than me is going to be able to pull out a lot of different scents than I am going to. But it's a pleasant thing to smell. I think it's getting kind of some more flavors. I'm actually getting a bit of apple in this, which is interesting. Maybe some of that oak smell. So yeah, let's take a drink. I mean, I just really love the proof. I mean, I think I just really like 100 proof whiskeys. Maybe it's because I am still a beginner, but I found myself just really settling into that 100 proof where you get a lot of those flavors, but then it has that sort of punch. It's not the right word, but just kind of that power of the proof, I guess, which I really enjoy. The finish is quite nice. I'm getting a lot of kind of sweetness on the finish. Maybe more wood up front. Yeah. I mean, to me, this is sort of like what a whiskey should taste like. It's earthy. It's woody, it's oak. It's got some of those kind of sweetness flavors. I mean, is it the most complex bourbon that I have in my very small collection? No, it's not. Is it good? Is it something that I would pour again? Yeah. I mean, I think it would also be just amazing in a cocktail. I think an old fashioned or a Manhattan with this would be incredible. When I have my sister over and she told me she wants me to make her a cocktail, I'll probably give her some of this Evan Williams because the proof is there, the taste is there. But it's also good just by itself, just neat. And so, yeah, I mean, if you don't want to break the bank and you want to have a delicious, yummy, sipping drink, maybe while you're reading the Greenbone Saga from Fonda Lee, I think Evan Williams' Bottled in Bond is a great choice. So thank you for kind of hanging out with me for a little bit. I'm going to be back. I'm going to start posting more videos. I think this framework of, drinking one whiskey and talking about a book or a book series is the way to go, and I'm certainly enjoying it. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel. I really want to build a kind of community, and community is super important to me. So if you have thoughts, if you have recommendations for books or bourbons or other whiskeys that you think I should try, please let me know. And yeah, have a good one. Cheers.